This is the Mann family. Pictured here from left to right, the Mann family aide and tracker Barnabas Hale, Blutarch Mann, Zephaniah Mann, his maidservant Elizabeth, Redmond Mann, a mysterious figure who's been ripped out, and Silas Mann. The Mann family, despite not being playable in any way in Team Fortress, are essentially the most important characters for the plot of the game. Not just for TF2, but for Team Fortress Classic as well, though the story was more retroactively fitted with TFC than being planned out that way. But that was actually also more or less the case with TF2 as well. Despite how widely the Mann brand is used in-game now, that wasn't always the case. TF2 started out with essentially no story, and the first we'd hear of Mann Co was 2 years into the game's existence, when the 4th day of the Sniper vs. Spy update showed us a snippet of the Mann Co weapons catalog that the spy orders the Dead Ringer and the Cloak and Dagger from. This showed us the Mann Co logo with its famous tagline, and introduced us to Saxton Hale as a character. It even gave us a glimpse into where the mercenaries were getting their weapons from. But at this point, any of the members of the Mann family and any relevance they had to the story still hadn't been seen. But first, let's talk about something a little bit different. And I'm just spitballing here, but maybe something like a fishing clash? So one time I went fishing in real life, and I caught a turtle, and I couldn't get the hook out of its mouth. Horrible experience. But now you can catch all of the non-turtles you could possibly want with just your phone. Incredible. So many kinds of fish. How do they do it? How do they fit it all on one phone? It's a mystery. But you can also travel to tons of different locations too, with different visuals and different things to catch. Experience fishing in Florida without the drawback of having to go to Florida. There are also daily and weekly events, PvP, and leaderboards, so you can compete with players from anywhere. And you can download Fishing Clash by using my link in the description or by scanning the QR code here. You can use my special gift code SquimJim to get a reward worth 20 bucks and a special avatar for free. That's better than expensive, it's free. And that code is SquimJim, and it helps out the channel, so go check it out. Alright, so up to this point, all we really knew about Mann Co was that the CEO was a big Australian man with a mustache, and that they sold a wide assortment of products. From watches to camera beers to crab walking kits, which are excruciatingly painful, but I do hear it's worth it. And most importantly of all, they sell hats. But a hidden page for the classless update later in 2009 would be the first time we'd hear the name Zephaniah Mann, when we see an advertisement for the Zephaniah Mann & Sons quarterly concern and the many weapons it sells. We also see a newspaper clipping from the year 1900 about the new Mann Co invention, the robot, which I'm sure is just a one-off gag and isn't foreshadowing anything else. But just a few months after that, we'd actually see Zephaniah Mann make it in-game, in TF2's first Halloween update in October 2009. He appears on Harvest Event as a ghost wearing an old top hat. A gibbous of sorts, and kind of a ghastly looking one. Hidden pages of the first Scream Fortress would reveal the first half of the Mann family portrait, and is the first time we'd see Zephaniah's sons that we now know are named Redmond and Blutarch. As well as Zephaniah's will, which was written on his own skin, and also which more or less sets the stage for the main plot of TF2. In his will, he tells how he vows to haunt the earth until he's quenched his all-consuming thirst for vengeance against the world, and especially against his sons, who convinced him to leave England and spend his fortune on land in the American frontier. Redmond and Blutarch persuaded their father to buy land in the New Mexico territory on their belief that it was filled with gravel. Gravel which they somehow think is a valuable resource and energy supply. Much to Zephaniah's dismay, they didn't find any gravel, and on his trip to New Mexico, he contracted putrid fever, bilious fever, blackwater fever, green fever, spotted fever, womb fever from a serious bout of superfluous uterus, white plague, marasmus, not to be confused with marasmus, sweating sickness, deplumatious tumors of the eyelids, pleurisy, membranous croup, scarlet rash, brain itch, stomatitis, blood poisoning, falling sickness, walking sickness, stationary sickness, shingles, jaundiced spine, and skull bloat. And then Scrivener's palsy in the process of writing his will. So, safe to say he didn't adapt well to the trip, and he blames his imminent death on his sons. Though in their defense, Zephaniah also seems to believe that gravel is valuable. And Zephaniah dies in 1850, leaving Mann Co to Saxton Hale's grandfather Barnabas, and the land he purchased split evenly between Redmond and Blutarch, knowing that they would fight over it. His will also contains a small passage that's obscured by some well-placed sand, though I wouldn't look too much into that, it's probably nothing. But right from their first appearance, the Mann family has remained visually about the same over the years, despite occasionally being portrayed by different artists and at different ages. In all the pictures we see of him around the time of his death, Zephaniah is a very disheveled, unhappy-looking old man. In fact, we never see him happy, even when his sons are born. He's generally portrayed as stern and bitter. On the other hand, Redmond and Blutarch are basically the same characters in terms of personality. And looks, because they are identical, at least if you believe the propaganda. I mean, Redmond is clearly a Giga Chad, with Blutarch just being a little weasel man. Or maybe it was the other way around. Either way. But in his first speaking appearance, Blutarch takes on a slightly more sinister role, but for the most part, the Mann brothers are seen as complete morons. They both greatly love and respect their father, but they hate each other's guts for seemingly no real reason. The more we learn about it, their never-ending grudge against each other just boils down to the type of bickering and arguments that children would have. Neither Redmond or Blutarch appear to be particularly malicious or power-hungry. They're just extremely out-of-touch rich kids who can't handle the idea of their sibling getting more than them. But at this point in time, in 2009, we now know why Mann Co was owned by Saxon Hale in the modern day of 1968. Though it wasn't until the engineer update in 2010 that we would learn that both Mann brothers are also still alive in the modern day of 1968. Up to this point, as far as I'm aware, the exact date of Zephaniah Mann's death was unknown, but the comic loose canon is what places it in 1850. This comic also explains that after Redmond and Blutarch inherited their father's land, both of them hired mercenaries to take the land from their brother, not expecting the other to do the exact same thing. Blutarch founds Builders League United, or Blue, and hires 9 mercenaries, and Redmond founds Reliable Excavation Demolition and also hires 9 mercenaries. Exactly how much building and excavation these companies actually do is still kind of unclear. They may very well entirely just be fronts for the mercenary war between the two Mann brothers. And speaking of which, neither seems to get the idea that they could hire more mercenaries, which leads to the Gravel Wars and an unending stalemate. But in 1890, Blutarch does hire the engineer's grandfather Radigan Conager to build him a life-extending machine in order to outlast his brother and win the land. Despite only being in his late 60s here, Blutarch appears to not be in the best health and is already hooked up to some kind of machine. So maybe the Mann brothers are like their father and are just very sickly. But upon returning to his workshop, Radigan is greeted by a strange woman who offers him 100 pounds of a mysterious element called Australium in order to build Redmond the same machine. He builds these machines for the Mann brothers, along with a third one for an unknown individual. And these machines work, allowing Redmond and Blutarch to live up to their 140s. But by the 1960s, these machines do appear to be breaking down a bit, with the Mann brothers now occasionally dying before being revived. But Blutarch has Radigan's grave looted for his blueprints and asks the engineer to fix the machine. The engineer update also gave us some incredibly subtle foreshadowing for the Halloween event that would come out later that year and its connection to the Mann family. You see this? You see this right here? It's another issue of Zephaniah Mann & Sons Quarterly Concern. And in this line, in very blurry, small text, you can see by Zephaniah and Silas Mann. We had never heard of this long-lost member of the Mann family, but the second Screenforged update revealed that Silas Mann was part of the Mann family portrait and is generally believed to be Zephaniah's brother, though their exact relationship is still unknown. All that we do really know about Silas is that he died shortly after Zephaniah and now haunts the Mann family manor as the Horseless Headless Horseman. Why he haunts the manor exactly is a mystery. The Mann family just doesn't want to stay dead, I guess. And then 2011 was actually very light on Mann family lore and went by without much new being revealed. Though the map Foundry that was released in winter of that year did contain hidden rooms with pictures of what appeared to be robot forms of the mercenaries. But of course, that doesn't have anything directly to do with the Mann family, right? And then the map Doomsday, released in summer 2012, did the same thing, also with a map marking Manworks, Deathbit, and Cactus Valley. But then, in August 2012, a mysterious bloodstain appeared on the TF2 website. Clicking it would lead to the birth certificate of Redmond, Blutarch, and Gray Mann? Gasp! A third Mann brother, who was abducted by eagles. Oh, and apparently the triplets' grandfather on their mother's side is related to Charles Darling, which is Saxon Hale's arch nemesis. So that's some interesting lore that's just kind of sprinkled in there. But at the same time, large blue tanks also started appearing outside of certain maps. And the next day, another bloodstain appeared on the website. This time, clicking it brought us back to Zephaniah's will. But gasp again, the sand that covered the bottom section is gone, revealing that Zephaniah's third son Gray had reappeared the year prior to his death and was now trying to blackmail him for his, quote, miracle gravel, which is Australium. So Zephaniah decides to leave that Australium to Elizabeth for safekeeping. And at the same time, after an ARG was completed by the community, the new comic Blood Brothers was released. This comic tells us the backstory of Gray Mann. In 1822, Zephaniah's wife Bet dies giving birth to triplets, much to Zephaniah's indifference. Gray is born smaller and weaker than his brothers, but incredibly smart and with the ability to speak in full sentences. This does freak Zephaniah out, and he wants the baby smothered, when suddenly, eagle attack! Gray is swooped up as one of the many victims of the Great Eagle Scourge of 1822. And that eagle raises Gray as one of her own, but when Gray is old enough, he kills her and eats her before crawling back to society to build his own empire. As Saxon Hale would say, that's some preposterous horse shit. But the company Gray does go on to found is called Gray Co, which appears on TF2 maps dating back to 2007 and actually predates any mention of Mann Co. I do doubt that that was pre-planned out, but it is a cool detail. Well, in 1971, Redmond and Blutarch both receive letters asking for a truce, but each brother thinks this letter is from the other. They realize they've been fighting this war for 100 years and that neither of them have an heir. So the natural solution, of course, is to build a pregnancy machine to get one of them pregnant. But then Gray Mann does reveal himself and explains that he sent the letters asking for a truce, and explains his intention on going after their true birthright, Mann Co. And then he murders his brothers and sends his robot army to attack Mann Co, which of course leads to Man vs. Machine. But Gray Mann appeared to have aged much better than his brothers, having his own Australian-powered life-extending device built into his back. It does seem likely that due to his intelligence, he probably built the device himself, but we also know that Ratigan did build a third life-extending machine, so that either could have gone to Gray or possibly another character. And the Mann family portrait also still has that mysterious figure ripped out. We do know that Gray reappeared the year before his father's death, so it could hypothetically be him, but that wouldn't explain why Redmond and Blutarch don't know that they have a third brother, and Gray likely wouldn't have had a reason to be there anyway. So that one is still a mystery. But right after Redmond and Blutarch are killed, their ghosts realize they never got a definitive answer on who won. Soldier tells them that they're still between worlds, and in order for one to win, they have to fully cross over into the next world. So each of them hire the mercenaries again to send their brother to hell, leading to Scream Fortress 2013. But that update did give us official voices for Redmond, Blutarch, and Zephaniah, all being voiced by Nolan North, who also voices Marasmus. And in the very brief moments that Zephaniah speaks, he tells them that Gray is still his favorite.
Look at me now, Father!
You did great, son.
Yes.
Gray is still my favorite, though.
No!
So the son he wanted smothered and was then blackmailed by is his favorite. Ouch. Though I guess Redmond and Blutarch did ruin his life. It's not like he has the best option to pick from there. Gray also got a voice in the Versus Saxon Hale mode, being voiced by Matthew Simmons. And while Versus Saxon Hale does offer its own story, the fact that it's purely community-made would very likely make it non-canon, in the same way that Death of a Sales Bot from the Robotic Boogaloo update is also non-canon. Plus, Saxon Hale acts very out of character in Versus Saxon Hale mode, so yeah, I'm just not considering it canon. But from here, we just get to the usual story beats that we've heard a bunch of times by now. The mercenaries lose their jobs because Redmond and Blutarch are dead, and are then rehired by Saxon Hale to defend Mann Co from Gray Mann's robots. But after a year of fighting and another stalemate, Gray goes to the Mann Co headquarters to tell Saxon Hale that he's given up, and instead asks for the Mann Co challenge, in which the CEO of another company can legally take over Mann Co if they beat Saxon Hale in unarmed combat. But Saxon Hale won't fight Olivia Mann, so she takes over Mann Co. Wait, yeah, Olivia, we haven't talked about Olivia. Gray Mann is not the CEO of Gray Co, but his daughter Olivia is. We learn in this comic that Gray apparently has a young daughter. Where did she come from? Is she adopted? Is she a robot? A clone? We don't know. She just kind of shows up. But I do kind of have to imagine they're planning on giving her some more relevance in the final comic, or whatever might come after that, because as of the comic Old Wounds, she's the last surviving member of the Mann family. But we're gonna get to that in a little bit. So when Gray and Olivia enter Mann Co's Australian vault, they find that it's been emptied, presumably by the administrator. And with his life-extending device running low on Australium, Gray then hires the Team Fortress class mercenaries to track down the TF2 mercenaries and the administrator. They capture the TF2 mercenaries and bring them to Gray Co, where the Classic Heavy has concluded that the Australium that they've been hunting is the key to immortality and wants it for himself and his team. He rips out Gray's life-extending spine thing and leaves him for dead. Gray dies rather unceremoniously after that, after explaining that all the evil things he was going to do with the Australium, the administrator would do much worse. And at the time this comic came out, that was a pretty big shock, the fact that they would just kill off Gray Mann like that, the villain of this whole comic series. But yeah, just like that, the Mann family is down to just Olivia. What she was doing when Gray Mann died and what she's been doing the last few comics is still a mystery. But I think we've covered more or less everything with the Mann family, so let's just do the quick timeline for old time's sake. On September 2nd, 1822, Redmond, Blutarch, and Gray are born to Zephaniah Nicodemus Mann and Bet Mann in Mann-upon-Thames, England. Bet dies in childbirth, and Gray is abducted by eagles. At some point, likely in the 1840s, Redmond and Blutarch convince their father to buy land in New Mexico, hoping that it's filled with gravel. Zephaniah becomes extremely sick on the journey, and no gravel is discovered. In 1849, after returning to society, a roughly 27-year-old Gray man attempts to blackmail his father. In 1850, Zephaniah dies, leaving Mann Co to Barnabas Hale, and his land split evenly between his sons Redmond and Blutarch, who then hired mercenaries to fight over that land, leading to the Gravel Wars and a never-ending stalemate. Zephaniah then haunts the earth as a ghost, wearing a top hat. Silas Mann, who previously ran Mann Co with Zephaniah, also dies around this time and haunts Mann Manor as the Headless Horseless Horseman. In 1890, Radigan Conager is hired to build life-extending machines for the roughly 68-year-old Mann brothers, which are completed in 1894. In 1930, the Mann brothers begin using the Team Fortress Classic mercenaries to fight the Gravel War. In 1968, the Mann brothers begin using the Team Fortress 2 mercenaries to fight the Gravel War. In 1971, Gray lures his brothers to a meeting and kills them, and then begins the Robot War to take over Mann Co. The dead Mann brothers then try to send each other to hell. In December 1971, Gray Mann invents the Robot Engineer. In 1972, Gray gives up on taking over Mann Co with his robots, and instead wins it in the Mann Co Challenge with Olivia. He hires the Classic mercenaries to track down the Administrator in the Australium, but they turn on him and let him die after his life-extending device is removed. And that's pretty much it. The story starts with Zephaniah dying in 1850, and ends over 100 years later with his sons dying in the 1970s. But his granddaughter is still out there, and I'm very curious as to what they were planning on having happen with Olivia in the final comic. I have to imagine she plays some part. Maybe she'll be set up as the next villain. Or maybe it's her that's ripped out of the portrait. Honestly though, it's pretty impressive how far in advance so much of the Man vs. Machine plot was set up. Basically, as soon as we started getting information about the Mann family and their impact on the TF2 storyline, we knew there was someone else involved. But I don't think we'll ever actually get a real answer as to who was ripped out of the Mann family portrait. It probably wouldn't make sense for it to be Gray, but I do think it was kind of more just to set up the mystery and the idea that there was someone else in the family. All this information about side characters like the Mann family and Saxon Hale were just sprinkled so gradually and naturally over the years. We know how big Mann Co is in the TF2 universe now, but it's interesting to look back and realize that, oh yeah, it just kind of started as a random advertisement on an update page and grew into some super complicated story. And I think that's really cool. I mean, overall, TF2 really doesn't have a very complex story. Almost all of it is carried by the characters that we like. But the fact that they just kind of built it up out of nothing and it's been as engaging and interesting as it is, I just think that's neat. And there is at least one more super important character to cover in this history series, so if I don't want it to take as long as this video did, I better get started on that. So, thanks for watching, and big thanks to this video sponsor, Fishing Clash, which you can still download with the link below. And of course, a super special thanks to my patrons like Varric, Captain Forex, Eggox, Colonel, Probably Vinegar, Caponicus, Kelso the Pirate, Pilsman's Fox, Some Crazy Idiot, Ozond, She-Shells, Salt God, Lavi, Taupe, Time Consuming, Man344, Nolan46, and Melodici. Alright, that's it. Peace out, dogs.